Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Mental Health Warriors, the MH Warrior TV, as we're known now. I'm your host for this evening, Caroline Murphy Bennis, the Rainbow Warrior, and I'm delighted to invite you to this new premiere of my show called the Words as Medicine. And we're kind of looking at the healing power of words and the fine art of communication, and how we can maybe redesign our inner dialogue and our outer dialogue to, live a much more content and happy life and improve our mental health. So this evening we have a really amazing guest, and her name is Grania, and she is a well-being expert and works in mental health in Ireland. Welcome, Grania.
Thank you very much, Caroline. I love that introduction. As you say, words are medicine. You're like, we have the amazing Grania already. I'm like elevated, and I was like, words are so powerful.
Exactly, yeah. And there's so many studies actually done on those words. Like the brain loves those words, like amazing and fabulous and fantastic and all that. So definitely, those are some of the tricks that we're going to be talking about in this show, to try and give out those endorphins to the brain, to definitely give our brains a little bit of a boost that we need, and make it a practice in our day. And so, Grania, I know you're a mental health professional, and you work with many different types of people, and we really are transform people's lives in Ireland. But we'd love to know a little bit about you and your life, and how you came to this profession, and what fueled your passion for this area.
Thanks, Caroline. So my tagline introduction is I'm a social scientist, wellbeing educator, and separated mum of five. I suppose for people to get to know me on a personal and a professional level, personally, I'm a separated mum of five. I think that kind of encapsulates a lot of how people would perceive me, and what fulfills the majority of my day, and what inspires me to be the best version of myself and to grow into myself. Professionally, I am a mental health professional, and my background for the past kind of like 20 plus years has predominantly been in addiction services. So anywhere that there was an individual with a drug and alcohol issue, I would have worked with services that they might have weaved it throughout their lives. So I would have been in psych services, prisons, probation, homeless, child welfare, under 18s, schools, pretty much drugs and alcohol shows up everywhere. So that was a really enjoyable and insightful piece for me, to be able to work at like a local, regional, and national level with all agencies, predominantly statutory and community sectors. What I learned though was, you know, I suppose when I grew into it, my kids were asking me the other day, what did you want to be when you grew up? You know, and
Yeah.
I was like, I actually always wanted to work with people who are more vulnerable than me, always. And they're like, that's nobody wanted that. That's rubbish. Like nobody. And I was like, I actually did. And they're like, when you were 9, I wanted to work with people more vulnerable than me. And I was like, no, I wasn't when I was 9. No, I wanted to be a teacher.
Okay.
But life was a fishbowl, so I only knew what I was exposed to. So I only knew teachers. So
Of
I wanted to
course.
be a teacher.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or a
and
nurse.
I
My
find
dad, my
that
dad, yeah, my dad was a nurse. So it was always either a guard, a teacher, or a nurse. That's it.
so I didn't know anybody else. So, but as I
Yeah.
kind of, especially I suppose when we talk about teens and the adolescent brain, during that stage of our lives, people grow into their sense of self and sense of identity, and they begin to explore that. And it was really then, I suppose, I had this realization that the world is unequal, and it's layered inequality, and that was something that always kind of stuck with me. So that kind of drove me to work with people who I felt were more vulnerable than me. anyways, that's kind of a sideline really, because what it taught me was I had all these stereotypes and expectations, and you have these boxes that you put people in, and really we learn from everybody and who's to define what vulnerability is. So anyways, professionally, that's what I did. I'm a complete nerd, so just qualified all the time, degrees, masters, HDFs. I've had this real hunger for self-esteem, which was the currency was academic achievement, because that was really important to my parents. Every time we said, "Oh, I'm in college doing such and such," or "Oh, I've gone back to college to do this," you know, their eyes would light up and my reward system would be hit. And I felt that I had more value in the world the more qualifications I had.
Okay.
So professionally, that's where I was at. And I suppose I'd reached kind of a bit of a plateau in my career, that I really had a great cohort of people that I worked with, a great network. I had worked for an amazing matriarchal boss who retired, and then I ended up with the man, which didn't work out. I am not anti-men, but this particular man was misogynist, so it just wasn't going to work. So that was a real wake-up call. It was like, what are you doing here? And the public sector moves much slower than the private sector. So I kind of felt there was all this learning and huge knowledge nationally, but also internationally. And the international doesn't filter in to the public national sector as quickly. So that's where I felt it had plateaued. It's kind of like, well, we can do this and we can do that and we can do the other. But, the public sector, it's run by civil servants and by departments and politicians. And so it can be kept very slow and very boxed. And so moving into the private sector was this opportunity to work with much wider experience and much broader frameworks, and to offer people the simplest solutions as quickly as possible. So I suppose that's kind of my mantra around mental and emotional well-being, is that yes, everybody's journey is a challenge. It doesn't have to be a difficult challenge. It can be a fun challenge, and depending on where you are in that journey. But it's really quite simple. It's just not easy. And what we can do is we can find the metrics that work for each individual, because it's unique to them. So that's where I was professionally. And I suppose personally, my story grew with my profession, because I was in a very fortunate situation that we were offered training and professional development all the time. So you're constantly been fed with lots of opportunities for further education. And that just paralleled with my personal life. So I suppose as I began to grow, I realized that my marriage was not what I thought it was, and that I was married to the idea of being married as opposed to the relationship that I was in. And so I had that personal journey in my kind of 40s. I've been separated, and I'm separated now 4 years and beginning my divorce. But I suppose the preamble that I think is more interesting is the fact that we spoke the last day about attachment and relationships. And as much as I may have had, and we all have different bumps in the road, some are bigger bumps than others, but a lot of mine stemmed from adoption trauma. That became my personal truth, the filter that I looked through everything with, and everything that happened was, on an unconscious level as a result of this adoption. And so it's kind of the unpacking of everything that happens to get to the root, to repack everything up. Which is fascinating.
That really is fascinating. And you've such well, it's funny that you talked about all your qualifications and everything, because before this interview, I was thinking, what would I describe Grania as? And I would have said the fountain of knowledge, because you just seem to have so many qualifications, and you've done so many courses, and it's amazing that actually that your journey has brought you to, even though it was maybe being trying to please your parents, but it has left you with a massive amount of kind of knowledge, and that it's helped you along your personal journey, And it's
Yeah.
amazing actually how when you talk about adoption, and Grania is part of a women's group that we run as well. That's what she's referring to, about an event that she had ran for us around attachment styles, and it's just it's fascinating when you mentioned about the kind of impact of your adoption, and how that was kind of maybe the kind of what you had to get to in yourself, in the core, because in Ireland it's such it's happened, it's kind of systemic really, and it was kind of like, I was thinking to myself how it was kind of, it's something that's really not kind of talked about as such, and like, when did you start to unpack that, like even as a professional when in mental health, that it took you years to really realize that within yourself? It's really interesting.
Yeah, I think I really only started to unpack it professionally maybe 10 years now. Even though it's personally, you're personally exploring things, you're personally looking for your biological family, or you're personally trying to answer questions for yourself, or you're personally trying to, not upset anybody while you're trying to find yourself.
Yeah.
And just around words and language, what's interesting about adoption is it's the one thing, as you said, that like it's not really talked about in so much that you always have to be grateful that you're adopted.
Okay.
So you don't get to look at the flip side of the coin. You don't ever get to go, well, it really wasn't nice being given away. Whatever the circumstances, I was given away, So you don't get to feel that. You have to repress that all the time. So you have this undercurrent of abandonment and rejection, because you just have to be grateful people took you, or have you, or want you, accepted you, or so there is a flip side to that.
And underneath that was kind of a sense of that feeling unworthy, maybe underneath that. So it's like having to take that off as a capstone nearly, and try and look at that yourself and realize that maybe the symptoms that were kind of showing up in your life were actually underneath that kind of gratitude level that you had, kind of like you said, that was on the surface, but underneath there was something more, to more work to be done in there. Yeah, that's amazing actually.
Oh yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and you're kind of unfolding a life of mystery, and it's funny, like people kind of say like, oh, have you got your real birth cert, as though it's a big deal, and then you're like, oh, it's not a big deal, but it actually is a big deal. You're kind of like, I don't have my actual birth cert. You're kind of like, it is kind of a big deal. You can't, and you don't have to explain it. I think that's where I got to. It's like, I actually don't have to explain it. It's a big deal to me. That's all that matters. Because I need to put that to rest for me. So so there's a lot in that, and you're it's a constant in your life, really. Like, so so I've only found out really maybe 8 years ago that I was born in a Magdalene laundry. I didn't know that. So every time you find information about yourself, you're like, it's another part of your footprints. And then you've a whole life ahead of you of people popping up in your life. So this, biological cousin might find you, or my biological father hasn't told his children, so I know the time's going to come where the four of them are going to come looking for me, because that's just what happens. Secrets never stay secrets.
That's amazing, actually, to think of that, that people might pop up, family members that, I wouldn't have actually thought of that. I suppose it's lovely to hear you tell that story and to understand it through your eyes, such, thinking of how, like you said, how it's something that, clouds your vision nearly, like, or had clouded your vision, and your perception of yourself as such, and for people outside of Ireland, because, there's a lot of this global audience here, like, you'd like to explain what, the Magdalene laundries were, and like what, maybe your mother might have
I
had
think the
to.
Magdalene laundries were more commonly known just as unmarried mothers' homes, and they were really run by nuns, and they were not pleasant places to be. Like, I suppose I remember meeting my biological mother for the first time. I was 22, and she had been looking for me for a number of years, and we had written to each other for a year. That's what you do for anybody that does have a family member that's adopted. You don't just contact them, you do go through the processes, because it can be very destabilizing. I've had people just go like, oh, we heard you're our cousin, and you don't know what to do, and then they disappear into the ether and you're left again, so you write to each other, and you have to really think about what after this, what after I make contact, or what after, what am I looking for from this, and can I communicate that, and what have I got to offer. And so we met, and when we met, it was the most awful trigger for my biological mother. It just brought everything flooding back to her about the Magdalene laundries, and she never really had anybody to share it with, so she shared it with me that day.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was
that must have been
work.
very overwhelming for you. Talk about a flood of emotions.
Yeah, because you have this romantic idea of what it's going to be like. And like, you're 22, so you're actually still very young. You're not neurologically fully developed anyway, so you do have all these romantic notions. And yeah, so for her experience of the Magdalene laundry was, that it was brutal. You were unwanted, you were working hard, you didn't get to touch your baby at all, you didn't even get to see it. So yeah, you had the baby, and we were taken away, and you were put in a separate cot unit. That's it. No touch, nothing allowed.
Unbelievable. And actually carried that for like 22 years. Imagine, unbelievable. And was she in Ireland? Because sometimes, when the maybe somebody who lives in a different country had left the country or had to leave, that was
No, she's Irish. No, she's Irish.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
So many with very torturous stories. Yeah, absolutely. And she really hasn't. She had another child after me, and it's interesting. So for me, it wasn't a forced adoption. It was a most definite. She was having me to give me up for adoption, but the second child she had was a forced adoption. And so with the grief of giving up one child and then filling that void with another, and then giving him up as well, she really hasn't recovered since.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
you can imagine the trauma, the trauma of that. And then, but for you then to witness her, having that major trigger was
well, it's interesting then from a mental health point of view, but also a spiritual point of view, because you do have that intergenerational trauma. So you can't, there's things that you can't shake. They're not my things, or are they my things? Because I can't remember consciously what happened the first few months of my life. So
of course
that body keeps the score of, was there shouting, was there no touch at all. I remember my auntie, when you were called and you had to pick up the baby at this time, at this day, in this place, and you were given them on the street. So my parents weren't there that day, so my auntie went and picked me up, and she didn't want my parents to adopt. My parents had 3 children already, 2 boys and a girl, and nobody wanted them to adopt. This was the worst thing in the world to do. An adopted child was going to ruin your life. So you had all that too. Feeling very unwanted. But my parents were adamant. So they but they weren't there. They were up in Sligo, and I was to be collecting them. So my auntie picked me up, and she's actually my favorite auntie, and she wouldn't touch me. She's like, I don't want to touch this child. She had the 3 to look after, and she'd 4 of her own, and she had this baby. They were off playing music, and they were coming back. She wasn't able to touch me, and she said, she's like, She's like, I was afraid of you. I didn't know who you were. You weren't one of us. And you didn't
Yeah.
cry. You didn't make a sound.
Oh my God.
You didn't. She said for 2 days. She goes,
Are
I
you
just went over
serious? A baby
and
that
I
didn't
felt,
cry for 2 days.
yeah. Oh, I didn't cry ever. Sure,
Oh
like
my
I was in
God.
the laundry. Like, why would you cry? Like you cried out. You know, you're not going to
That,
continue to cry. So,
wow.
so she
That's
said on the,
unbelievable.
yeah, she said that evening when she went to change my nappy, she said that was it. She goes, I loved you from that second. I was like, why? And she
Oh,
goes, the worst rash I've ever seen. She goes, you were just blood and sores. She says, you were in an awful state. And she goes, I just took care of you then. And I was like, that was so. She was telling the story, having a few drinks. And I didn't hear the story up until about like 10 years ago.
wow.
And I was so sad when I heard it. It was just like
Mm.
this wave came over me that I just had to cry for the baby that I was. It was so
Yeah.
neglected, you know. But it was really healthy to be able to do that, to go,
Yeah.
oh, I did feel sorry for her. It doesn't mean I feel sorry for me now, but it's
Yeah.
okay to just cleanse from that and to heal from that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so but she's yeah, so that was her story anyways. Um
Amazing.
and after that then all the other parts of the family started adopting. When I turned out kind of okay, you know, then we're riddled with children that are adopted now. Our family. Yeah.
What an amazing story, Grania. I mean, like even to even for you to hear that about, condition that you were in when you were, handed over,
Yeah.
it just goes to show, and the fact that you a baby, not a newborn, a small baby not able to cry, had just cried themselves out. It's
Yeah.
just shocking.
Absolutely.
It really is. It's
They had me
those.
they had me about, this is my dad's favorite story, but they had me about maybe 2 months at this point, and they brought me back to the nuns. Like they went to visit the nuns,
Mhm.
and so what had happened was all the cousins had been in, and one of the older cousins had banged a door near my cot. And she came in, she's like, oh my God, I'm sorry, Auntie Pat. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to wake the baby. I was the youngest, so they'd been well used to babies in the house. And
Mhm.
they all went, yeah, she still didn't cry. I still hadn't cried, still hadn't made a baby. So then they started banging pots and pans and all this sort of stuff. Nope, not a peep. So my parents went in then to meet with the nuns to say, could we take a look at her records? Is there any tests? Is she deaf? And they went,
Wow.
oh, is she deaf? We're so sorry. You didn't ask for a deaf child. Bring her back and we'll get you another.
Oh, you serious?
Deadly serious. That my dad's like, I was so mad. I've never, because my dad trained as a priest originally. And he's like,
Yeah.
I had great respect for the nuns up until that second that he was going to change a child like a skirt.
Yeah, I was
It's
going to say
like,
like a top,
yeah, yeah,
like
like, oh, sorry,
just
you can ask for a deaf one. We'll get you,
exchange it.
yellow
Yeah,
one.
have you got the receipt there? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and that
unbelievable.
it's not like, we were kind of asking because obviously if she needs additional supports, the more we
Yes,
know, the more we can help.
the fact that she
So
doesn't cry, she doesn't respond, she doesn't have,
yeah,
the
those,
your basic, like those basic needs.
yeah,
You just had kind of suppressed your basic needs. That
yeah. But you don't have facial recognition or anything, and you don't have any early attachment because you don't have anybody coming to the cot to smile at you, or you don't have any of that.
Mm,
So
unbelievable.
all those
Mm.
early attachment issues, obviously, you just build on those. So that's why I tell the adoption story. Yeah,
Yeah. It's
yeah,
so important to tell that story though as well, and it's and like I suppose, like I said, later on, even when you do have the lovely parents that you have, that you're left with trying to work out integrate that into your life, both mentally and spiritually,
well,
and you know
my parents are great. But as
Yes.
I say to everybody, I'm very lucky because they're both in their 80s, and I'm very lucky they've lived so long, because if they had died 20 years ago, 40 years ago, I didn't love them as much as I do now, you
Right.
know.
Okay. Yeah.
So I had
Yeah.
a lot of healing to do,
Yeah.
and people then make this assumption that, oh, she was adopted into this perfect family, and
Mm.
it wasn't.
Right.
Like,
Okay. So
they
that
did
wasn't.
the best
Yeah.
they could with what
Yeah.
they had, and I mean
Yeah.
with what they had emotionally themselves, and what
Yeah.
they knew from the trauma of their childhoods as
Yes.
well.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
so I need,
Yeah.
like, even still they'd be kind of like, oh, we're like sorry about that, you know. So I'm really lucky to have them around so long, so that I can heal with them. I
Yes.
don't have to
Yes.
say to them, did you know, because both my parents were alcoholics. Did you know this happened to me? Did you know I was assaulted by this person? They don't need to know that.
Okay.
They're not able for any of that. They're not actually
Yeah.
able to handle the guilt of that.
Mm.
But what
Yeah.
it means is I get to heal myself independent
Okay.
of them, and I can actually just love and accept them for who they are.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Their
Mm-hmm.
intention was never ever to hurt anyone,
Yes.
especially me.
Of
Yeah.
course. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, there's a lot to integrate there, and like it's just a whole. I know when we talked before, and we had an interview ourselves before. It's just that, it's the Irish story, isn't it? Like it's just that, of a time when, like that. I suppose now that we're opening up those stories for people to really understand, the complexity of a society that was just suppressed and oppressed for so many years, and that, like you said, even being adopted into then a family that wasn't really capable of looking after you properly either, as such, to the best of their abilities as such,
Yeah.
but of its time. And I'm just actually want to read out a few comments here from the. It says from the sorry, welcome to Warrior TV, Grania, from everyone on the Mental Health Warriors. So you're getting a very warm welcome. They're all listening into you.
Very much, everybody.
And Steve, that's from the UK. That was Adam DeVow. And then we have Steve Knapp from Australia saying, "Good afternoon, ladies," because it's an afternoon, and we're actually in the evening, the night here, and I think Stephen is first thing in the morning. And then we have, yeah, it says, oh, Steve says again, "Thank you so much for sharing. What a powerful story. You are amazing. We love hearts." So there you go.
He's definitely a morning person. Thank you, Stephen.
And then Kerry is asking, what does mental health mean to you, particularly?
Okay. Well, being a nerd, Terry, I suppose mental health to me is actually quite narrow, because mental health is like the absence of mental illness and being able to problem solve and cope with stress, technically, because I'm a nerd, and that's the
Yeah.
definition, really.
Yeah.
But I suppose I look at mental health as that more broad scoping emotional and mental health, which is far more to do with your self identity and self awareness and self acceptance and self mastery. And once you have those aligned, then you can shine your light so that it can reflect others and help others, as well as be independent and grow in yourself. That would be my interpretation of it. But
And
I
I'm just
also
wondering.
think, yeah,
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish.
I also think, just while we're on the theme of words, that it's more than that. It's how it's feeling that that self-worth, that self-knowing that not just everything's going to be okay in this kind of dreamlike way, but just know that you are okay, and there is hope, and you're connected, even though, because so many people come to me like, now I feel so lonely, especially if they break up relationship. I'm so lonely in a crowded room, and it's amazing mental health to be able to feel confident, comfortable, controlled, and calm in your own company or in crowds. So Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a little bit like, what I know for myself on my own journey, and through my writing, that I always try to, it's about coming home to yourself and being home and being safe within yourself and being okay, being connected to people around you, but really to have that kind of that really deep connection to yourself and your connection to life and your relationship with life. Yeah, as in that's you kind of breaking into the spiritual side of things, I suppose, but that kind of deep connection and rootedness to self as such, I think, is kind of that I suppose when you've definitely you've come, and it's amazing that I can see as becoming well developed in that, especially when you say about the power of those of word. We talk about the power of words and the power of adoption. That is something that is very hard to come home to. The kind of peace in yourself, I'm sure, from kind of feeling kind of a disconnected identity as such, that you might have carried with you, so that's it's a fantastic and I'm just wondering about maybe what on your journey and with all your learning and all your knowledge um, and your expertise and your experience with dealing with yourself and other with clients, like what are the practices that you find that are most effective for mental health?
Um, for me personally,
Yeah.
yeah, obviously. So well, I suppose I kind of look at mental health as this magic, and the practices that go with it for me is like having yeah, the way kids would ask you, like, no, what's your superpower, if
Yeah.
you could have any superpower. Mine would it changes now, but it used to always be like, oh, I wish I could move things with my mind, or that I could operate from one place to the next. But really, good mental and emotional health is the magic, if you ask me, because as you said, like that deep rooted connectedness or grounding or your own self-awareness, that everything that I'm looking at or doing, I can look at through this lens of safety. And that's why I think mental health is different strokes for different folks, because for me, a lot of my trauma was in not feeling safe, not feeling wanted, not feeling belong. So now I I have that. I can give that to me. I can validate that for me. So in terms of practices, I would always say different strokes for different folks. Whatever you are into, like I would have started definitely on a physical health journey. That's where I began to have a relationship with my mental health. It was swimming and running and in the gym, and having that mental agility to push myself. That's when I began to have that mental health relationship.
Okay.
And then discovering the power of that and how I could apply it to other parts of my life. Whereas
Yeah.
now my mental health practices are, body, mind, and spirit. So I feed my body, I feed my brain, um, both both with words, but also with the foods that I eat. Like I'm very careful. I want to be around a long time, and I want a really good quality of life. So how I exercise the quadrants of my brain, and my physical health is around strength, longevity, and coordination. I'm very like have omegas 3 and 6, lots of B12. I take moringa powders on my thyroid, heavy metal detox smoothies. I'm very making sure that I'm kind of minding my machine.
Yeah.
Because you can have all the great self-talk, but if you're, drinking and smoking and, having lots of fatty foods or whatever, that it's going to have an effect on your body as well. Like I can't talk myself just out of that as much as I would like to.
Yeah.
So physically I take care of myself, but then also I would, I juice, I journal, I jump every day. So in the morning, that's how I start my day. I always drink celery juice. I drink lemon juice, then celery juice, then cucumber juice. I will always have I jump, either dance or I skip. I love skipping for lots of different reasons.
Yeah.
Um, it makes me feel young and fast, and I'm always impressed that my pelvic floor is just so amazing. So I'm always like, this body's amazing when I'm skipping, and it's good for bone density. So, but it pumps the blood up to around your body, so it spikes all your endorphins and your dopamines and everything like that. So journaling then is a standard mental health practice for me. And I started off by just writing 2 pages of whatever was in my head a day. And then I kind of learned the craft of asking the right questions and been able to answer those. And it really helps you attune your mind to what are the questions I should be asking myself. And when you're journaling, it's really developing that personal relationship with yourself, which it took me years to discover was like the best relationship. And I'm so fun and nice. And I love spending time with myself. So it's hard at the beginning, but when you get there, it's like, don't interrupt me. I'm having a great time here right now. So gratitude, like I know it's all the taglines, gratitudes, but gratitudes is the antidote to anxiety and depression. And to be able to create a dialogue with yourself, if you have to force yourself to have 3 gratitudes a day. But then I quite often find, like, with women, and as you know, I specialize in parental separation. So a lot of the women that I work with would be just nearly resentful the majority of the day, like filling the dishwasher, cleaning the floors, doing the laundry, looking after the kids, and like dealing with the ex-husband, or this and so the self-talk, even if they're doing 3 gratitudes a day, is still, even if they're not really saying words, that there's that sense of resentment and martyrdom all the time. So I plug in on focus during those times, those mundane tasks that we're doing all the time. That's an ideal time to have a really good talk with yourself and have either your affirmations or your gratitudes. So I will always, if you can say 100 gratitudes a day, you could say 1,000 gratitudes a day. And I challenge myself every day to kind of see what else I can come up with, and to always involve at least 3 things a day of what you love about yourself, and that builds your foundations of your growth mindset, and you're constantly rewiring your brain. And the more you do it, the less you actually see what you saw before. You genuinely, you're not in this zone of like toxic positivity. It's just the ability to be able to go, okay, I'm grounded in this. I get this. And
it's kind of I love that kind of, like, even the mindfulness with your tasks, during the day. I remember years ago starting with that, and noticed changing that within myself, that kind of switch where, instead of resisting life, you're kind of accepting it, and you're kind of, and I find that the most creative times for me are the mundane little jobs around the house, because it's actually something to do with, your automatic mind is busy doing a little job that doesn't need much, and then it actually frees a creative mind to come up with. So you could be like, making the dinner, putting the washing in the washing machine, and you're just kind of, if you're happy enough in that, you're kind of, it's a simple thing to do. So it's kind of a simple task. But when you're in that kind of state that's not resisting it, then it actually, next thing, you start to get these little intuitive hits, or, these creative ideas, or these things that you've been thinking about and you've been trying too hard to think about, start to kind of come together and make connections. And you kind of, I always find it's, so you can really turn those things, those tasks around, and it makes a huge difference. And even another, like, I love the way you were talking about the inner dialogue, and kind of like, it sounds like you have a mantra nearly going on all the time in your mind, that does kind of reprogram those kind of negative kind of, dialogues that you've probably heard. And I often notice when you become aware of it, you can pinpoint like where that came from, where it's that kind of personality as such. It might be somebody in your family, or it might be something that you heard when you were a child, whatever, and it's not even your own kind of voice. It's something that was kind of, programmed into you, and to become kind of comfortable or kind of friendly with that, as such,
Yeah.
and I love so like I think it just goes to show the power of words in your story, how you have so successfully kind of been able to, take
So that
take
is the power word.
control, control of your mental health that way.
I think the other thing that um, that for me anyway projects and protects me is the my commitment to growth and learning. And initially, like so say 20 years ago, it was like, oh, if I wanted to learn anything, I had to find somebody who I thought was like the lead or the best in that area or what, whereas now it's like I remember somebody saying to me years ago, like, oh, are you not doing such and such a diet? We're all in slimming world, or we're all in this. Do you want to come along? And I was like, no. Well, never mind the fact that I didn't want to lose weight, like not that I was opposed to it, but it wasn't on my agenda. But it was just kind of an Irish woman, we're all doing this. Come on, But in that moment, I kind of go, why is everybody following the people that are struggling with their weight, as opposed to aligning themselves with the people who are happy and content and living well? And that was it seems really basic now, but it was very insightful to me at that time that I went, oh, there's a lightning bulb moment. And so just to meet life, I suppose, with curiosity and compassion, without kind of having people on pedestals. So my commitment to learning then and courses, and I wasn't a huge reader, but when I don't read fiction. I love self-help reading, but I do like courses as well, and I love that group dynamic. I love being a part of men and women, but I especially love being in a group with women. But there's huge learning in that, always listening to other people's stories or watching them where they are in their journey, because sometimes maybe it's a bit like, I might have missed a beat. You're on the trajectory and you're growing, but sometimes we forget, oh yeah, that happened to me too, and I didn't address that. And that's really interesting, or just to see it from another person's perspective, because their experience is completely different. Or so I love learning and that commitment to kind of keep doing courses, and there's so much available.
Yeah, and it's again following your curiosity. It's kind of having that fire for the passion for learning, as I call it. That you're kind of that really is kind of tapping into your vital force as well. That that you're kind of on track when you're kind of getting you're getting an energy from it. You're being energized by your interests. And it's like one of your basic needs as such. So it's kind of like. It's as I say. So I always think that it's like a coil where you're going up, like in the Celtic spirituality we have those spirals, and I always think it's like a spiral. You're either going down the spiral or you're going up the spiral, and you're always trying to go up, but it takes effort to go up. So like if you follow your curiosity, like it'll bring you up instead of being stuck in a loop. Because even when you're progressing so much, like you have. And I notice myself, you still do get to a plateau and you can feel a little lull, and you'll say to yourself, I don't feel fantastic at the moment. Like, what's the issue? And it's that self-inquiry constantly as well, isn't it? And like, is it somewhere else that I need to look at? Or like, I love what you say about, listening to other people unpack their kind of issues that like maybe you haven't unpacked properly before, and like it's I mean, even when you asked me on to, a great example was when you asked me on to your podcast series that you have for the separated families, that I was like, oh, I didn't really say, oh, why would you want to just talk to me about that? Because like, anyway, like Caroline, because your parents separated when you were 18. Oh, Oh yeah, I suppose, yeah, I could talk about that. And I just said, like, I didn't even think
Which
that
is
was
what all
anything.
separated
Yeah,
parents want to hear is what happens to
yeah,
children afterwards, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I was kind of like, I was like, I totally didn't get that, and then I realized, like, oh yeah, I suppose this could be helpful to somebody, you know,
Very
this
much
could
so.
be,
Yeah.
yeah, so it was fantastic, and I know you're heading off, Grania, so we'll have to you've somewhere to go and to pick up, and I just like to say thank you so much. And there's another couple of let me see, I think we saw, yeah, we've seen all the amazing show.
Before we
Well
go,
done. Yeah,
thank you. Before we
it's
go, I thought it's useful when we're
yeah,
talking about words of medicine.
yeah,
Just there as you're talking about, like, oh, people want to go to Slimming World to lose weight. Like, that's just the perfect example where words stop us from doing the exact thing that we want to do. So when people say, like, I want to lose weight, if you even just sit in your body when you say the word lose or lost, your
yes,
body recoils from it because we don't naturally want to lose anything. So when
yeah,
people are
yeah,
using the language, or I want to lose weight, they're just not going to with that language.
yes,
They're they're creating a cycle of resistance in themselves. So the
yeah,
language around it's easy for me to have the body I want, or it's easy for me to have the waistline that I'm looking for, or I have a higher metabolism when I'm doing this, or so that people
yeah.
can um, reprogram themselves, and words then do begin to heal them physically and mentally.
Yeah, excellent. That's amazing, actually, because I do remember actually years ago when I was a child, we were talking about our teenagers getting their first job, and when I got my first job and I started working, and I had this attitude then, oh, it's really easy to make money. It's really easy to make money,
Yeah.
and I always had that with me, kind of like, oh, it's easy, and I actually did really well then because I kind of thought it was like it was a mantra that I had in myself that I didn't realize I had. And now there's a lot of conversation around that, unpacking that, but it's just maybe
Yeah.
even having a positive attitude to things, and talking to yourself like that in a positive way about, like, especially with weight and things like that. And it's a really obvious there because it's a physical thing that you can see. Because I know that I always say I don't go on diets because the minute I go on diets, I put on weight. Because the minute I say I want to lose weight, I start gaining it, because I start to get I think, it's
Yeah,
like the
you don't want to
psychological
lose
thing.
anything. You have to
Yeah,
hold
yeah,
on
yeah.
to
Like,
everything.
yeah, come on, give it to me. And it's like, yeah, I want
Yeah,
more
you're never
food,
going to lose it.
You get starving, you get your appetite increases,
Yeah,
the minute.
yeah. So
Yeah, it's
so it works
amazing.
against it. Yeah,
Oh, no,
for sure.
thank you so much, Bonnie. We could talk
Thank
forever.
you
And I
for having
just wanted to, could you just give people information about how they could contact you and your podcast series and things like that? We'd love to, spread the word of your great work and how people can get in touch with you.
Well, thank you, Caroline. Well, first and foremost, I can be found on Flourish by Design.
Very good.
My bio and
Wellness.
link is
Yeah.
Caroline Flourish by Design. My email's there. My website is www.wellbeingtraining.ie, and the Divorce or Separated Parenting podcast and any of the courses we develop is been updated on our website. So www.wellbeingtraining.ie, or of course Flourish by Design.
/wellness. That'll get straight to you. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Goya. And I've just seen Steve is saying, fantastic show, ladies. Loved it. Last question would be
We do travel to Australia, so it's like anytime, no problem.
Oh, yes. Okay. So Steve, she can go down there.
On tour. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, actually, Adam has already talked about that, Mental Health Warriors on tour. So you never know.
Never know. I'm ready for a tour. Yeah, let's hone it.
And I just want to say thank you very much to all our listeners and everybody who's watched the show from whatever country and all around the globe in different time zones. We're being delighted that you have your company. And the next show is on Monday morning at 11 a.m. The coffee morning with the lovely Kerry Burr, the human GPS. I'll be there with Kerry DeVow as well for a lovely chat about how we struggle with our mental health in the workplace and how that can affect it. So stay tuned for that. Come back and see us on at 11 o'clock on Monday morning, UK time. Thank you so much, Grania, for spending your evening, your Friday night with us. And Really appreciate it. Okay. See you,
Have a great
everybody.
weekend.
Bye.